Hello, people of the internet. Welcome to the Special Report, your news and views program about geek gaming culture on the internet. My name is JD Shadow. Coming up in the show today, Nintendo officially announces that Metroid Prime 4 is going to be delayed and handed over from scratch to the developers at Retro Studios, which is the people who made the previous Metroid Prime games. We're going to be talking about what this will mean for the game going forth, as well as some other things that this could possibly mean. All of this and the OCRemix track of the day will come your way right about now. Nintendo delivered some pretty disappointing news, not completely terrible news, but disappointing nonetheless. If you were wondering where in the world Metroid Prime 4 ever went to after it was announced to be in development at the 2017 E3, since then we didn't even hear so much as a peep about what exactly is going on. We didn't hear anything about the game. We didn't even hear about the game even being mentioned. They didn't say a word about it. They didn't even acknowledge that it existed. Well, today, Shinya Takahashi, the senior managing executive officer at Nintendo, gave us a developmental update about what is going on with Metroid Prime 4 2 years or a year and a half after it was first announced, and they essentially stopped talking about it. We kind of have an idea now why they stopped talking about it. According to Shinya, he had said that Nintendo was not happy about what had been developed so far. They were not satisfied with what the final product was going to be. And in a bit of a panic, we all thought that he was going to say that Metroid Prime 4 was going to be canceled. And that would have been not good for anybody. Of course, we'll get to why that is in just a second. Let's just say we do need a new Metroid game of some form or fashion. However, he did not say that. As a matter of fact, he actually said that the game is going to be started from scratch, that the development is going to be handed over to Retro Studios, which, in case you are living under a rock, those were the people who were in charge of the first 3 Metroid games. Now, he called it a Metroid Prime series, which is kind of weird, and I'll get to why here later on when I get to what my thoughts are about this. But he said that because they were responsible for the first 3 Metroid games, that they are the perfect fit for making Metroid Prime 4. Keep in mind, however, that most of the people who were working on the Metroid Prime trilogy at Retro Studios are no longer with the company. There are some that are still there, but most of them have moved on. And keep in mind that Retro Game Studios are not a terrible game studio, but they have had a few misses here and there. So getting a hit off of Metroid Prime is not an absolute guarantee. However, we can safely assume it's going to be in better hands than what Shinya thought that the current plans were going to be. Now, in case you are unaware about the last time we saw a proper Metroid game, it was 2011 or 2010. When did Other M actually came out? I am not aware of that anymore. But yes, that was the last time we even saw a proper Metroid game, unless you want to count Federation Force as one, which I do not. So yeah, Other M was the last game to come out that featured Samus proper. Well, you can maybe count Samus Returns, but that was sort of a remake of Metroid 2. So yeah, the last proper Metroid game to actually add to the story was in fact Other M. Now, before we go into my thoughts about the game being delayed, can we please go back and let's talk about just why Nintendo took this long to even announce a new Metroid game, a new proper Metroid game, let alone have it delayed this long? The reason is because Well, there were a lot of polarizing opinions about Other M, to the point where it became a broken fan base. Now, there are games and television shows and itinerations of fandoms that do break the base at some point in time, but most of them seem to be okay, we can move on from it. Why is this the one time that we can't seem to move on from Metroid Other M existing? I want to know that. What is it about that one game that drove our base so much into the ground that we can't seem to recover from that? I know why. It's because of how rabid the debate even got. Now, everybody probably knows my opinions about Other M. I thought it was a good game. It was an unfinished story, but it wasn't a bad story. It needed some more refining in order to make some of the storyline elements make sense. Of course, the game was way too short, and I thought it wasn't that difficult to beat. However, I was satisfied by that story because it showed Samus in a more vulnerable light. It did something that no other Metroid game had done up to that point, and it actually showed how Samus might have reacted to some of those things that she has seen. And yeah, I had said time and time again, I was eventually going to try to do a series in which I tried to defend some of the quote-unquote bad things in entertainment, and Metroid Other M was going to be one of my main projects in that particular series, and I do still plan to do that. But let me just go into a brief detail about why I thought Metroid Other M was not a bad game. I just said one of those things, which is that no, it did not destroy Samus's character. Did she even have a character before that? Did she even have a personality? Did she even have any backstory before that? Maybe she did in some form or fashion. The manga did go into great depths about that, but we didn't go into great detail besides the notion that she was raised by the Kozos. So we didn't really know too much about how Samus conducts herself, how she is. And I think a lot of people just got mad at the notion that their version of Samus didn't get depicted in that. Many times people depicted her as some sort of cold, calculated person, a la Ripley from the Alien series, which the Metroid series was inspired by. And I understand that, the whole idea of you're supposed to be alone and you're supposed to not really know your surroundings and you're really not supposed to have anybody there to help you. And I understand how some people might be thinking that this kind of shied away from that whole aspect of Metroid. However, my whole theory is that Metroid Prime 3 Corruption kinda bucked that trend in a way, at least in the early going in the beginning of the game. So that is out of the question. Plus, Samus has never really been a silent protagonist. Even in Super Metroid, she wasn't really a silent protagonist. It was only in the Metroid Prime series that it didn't give her a voice, unless you count Jennifer Hale's doing the grunts and the screams. That, to me, signifies that, yeah, she was always supposed to be able to tell you what was going on. In a way, this was not the show not tell anything at all. This was, okay, show people what is going on, but tell them in a way if they really do need for you to say something to them. And it's because of that that I do believe that it was great that we do get to see Samus actually talk in a extended script for her. And no, I don't think Jessica Martin did a bad job. As a matter of fact, I think she was one of the best parts about Metroid Other M, along with Anthony Higgs, one of the side characters that always called her Princess as a bit of a pet name. And can we please get off of him calling her that? Because, yeah, we always have nicknames for our co-workers, family members, acquaintances, friends. So yeah, let's get off of his case about that. I didn't think it character assassinated her. As a matter of fact, I think it added to her character. We now know that she does have a heart of gold. She might be more of a pacifist. She wants to save people. She wants to do the right thing. She wants to do what she feels is right. She has a moral obligation to help people as far as she's concerned. But yeah, no matter what you may feel about the Metroid Other M game, and no matter what you feel about my opinions about it, do you may please move on with our lives? I mean, there's a lot of people that, okay, the game wasn't perfect, but it wasn't this all stop about the Metroid series. I mean, I've seen people viciously attack anyone who dares to say anything good about Metroid Other M. When did the Metroid fanbase become that rabid? Why is it that it's that game that essentially tries to kill the entire franchise? It's not because it's Nintendo's fault. Did they make a perfect game out of that? No, they did not. I did say that there were faults in that, but I don't think it's worth trying to burn Nintendo down with pitchforks and torches over it. I don't think it's worth all that. Remember, at the end of the day, it's just a game, and we don't need to be at each other's throats over that. The main reason why Nintendo has not made a Metroid game in the past 8 or so years is because they don't know which part of the player base they should alienate. They don't want to alienate any of the player base, but it seems as though in order to satisfy one part of the base, you have to completely eradicate the other side. And it's not worth it to do either, so they just didn't bother. And I don't blame them in the slightest. Why feed that rabid fanbase another game in which no matter what you do, you're gonna tick off a whole half of that player base? Because there were a lot of people who did like Other M, myself included, and to those people, Nintendo going to say, hey, we're going to make another Metroid Prime game, or make another Metroid game in which Samus is not talking, or none of her personality aspects are going to be explored, is them actually succumbing to the pressure from those people who hated the game and wanted Nintendo to just say, make my kind of Metroid game, and saying, oh, Samus's character was assassinated. There was no character to assassinate up until that point. And don't get me started on the Ridley scene. That to me has a whole nother video explaining just that. Don't get me started on that. But you see where I'm going with this. The whole reason why Nintendo did not make a Metroid game up until this point is because the player base was so divided and it had no reason to be. Yes, we can disagree about whether or not it was a good game, but why does it have to be that rabid? Why do we have to go down each other's throats because we did or didn't like a game? That to me is completely counterproductive. And the only reason why I would get on people's cases who didn't like Other M's is because they're the ones that are usually going after those people who do like the game. And to be fair, people who did like the game are also jumping down the people's throats of those people who don't like the game. But why is it that one game? Metroid Prime Hunters to me is not a terrific game, but I'm not going to sit there and lambast everybody who did or didn't like the game as some sort of Trump supporter or somebody along those lines. I'm not going to do that. That is not something that we should be doing. Yes, the game exists. We need to deal with it. We need to deal with the fact that the game came out, it existed. Some people did like it, some people didn't like it, but at the end of the day, the game did have room to improve, but it did give us some new ideas in which they could expand upon if we let it happen. And unfortunately, we're so busy jumping down each other's throats, and Nintendo's trying to figure out whose side to piss off and whose side to completely satisfy. And what company wants to do that? I don't get it. I don't understand why we can't just move on with our lives. Yes, it existed. It came out, people played it. Some people did like it. Why can't you move on with your life? Is it time to say, hey, we understand, we're ready to move on from this? We're ready to not jump down Nintendo's throats if they decide, hey, let's make Other M2. Let's go all the way with it. Let's continue with the Project M series. And that to me is something that caught me a little bit off guard when Shinya Takahashi referred to Metroid Prime as a series within the Metroid franchise of games. And to me, that was a little bit awkward of him to say that, because does this mean that Metroid Prime is going to exist in its own little world? Is it going to be this series that has its own story, and then they're going to go back and maybe do another M game, or maybe they're going to have the two series go side by side, assuming that they they are actually going to treat Project M like a project, assuming that they are going to try again with that formula that Other M established. What is the meaning behind what he said there? I thought that was a little bit peculiar that he called it a series within a series. So does that mean that they do have other Metroid games lined up? I wonder where they're going with that. We did see Metroid Samus Returns, which was kind of a remake of Metroid 2 and kind of stood on its own in a way, akin to how Metroid Zero Mission was the original Metroid on the Game Boy Advance. I do feel as though that perhaps they might be thinking about running a couple different Metroid series side by side and having each one have some sort of overarching story that adds to the Metroid lore. And if they can pull that off, if they can really pull that off, then that would be incredible to have them do. Like if you have some sort of, okay, the side-scrolling Metroid series, which is all platforming and stuff like that, then you have the Prime series, which is more 3D aspect, more of a first-person view, and then you might have the Other M, if that's the thing that's going to happen. If you have it be to where that's a more storyline aspect game, that's more of a Metal Gear Solid type of storyline based Metroid game in which you do have those characters interacting with one another, to people who do like that sort of Metroid game, who would like another Metroid game like that. Maybe that's a way they can go about pleasing everybody. It was like, hey, we understand that some people did like that Other M game, but we do understand that there are people who do like the traditional Metroid games, and some people also like the Prime series. Let's see if we can run everything going side by side here, and that would be incredible if they could pull that off. Maybe have different teams doing different things. Case in point, Retro Studios, who the last great game they made was Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze. Any other one seems to be hit or miss, and as I said before, the people who were responsible for Metroid Prime are no longer there. Most of the ones have moved on. There are some people that are left there, but most of those at Retro Studios have now gone on to different studios and stuff like that. Now, the name Retro Studios, because it's so synonymous with Metroid, and because the Prime series is so synonymous with them, that alone could get people excited, say, hey, we should have done this all along. We should have said, hey, let's just have Retro do this. But given as it has been hit or miss lately, and more hits than misses, I would assume, should we be concerned here? Should we be a slight bit concerned that perhaps the new people at Retro Studios may not really know what to do with the series, know what to do with Metroid Prime 4, especially now that the main story that was going along with the Prime series with the corruption and Dark Samus is now wrapped up. What else can you do with that particular story? What else can you do with it? What more loose ends are there that need to be tied up? That to me is the one thing I thought, wait a minute, why is there a Metroid Prime 4 when everything's been wrapped up, unless we're going to go into a new story that has that sort of 3D aspect to it? Maybe the Prime series is just, as I said, the series being in 3D and stuff like that. Prime being first person, number one. But can Retro Studios pull something off that they haven't done in about 10 years, which was make a new Metroid game with maybe a fraction of the people that was working there when they finished off Metroid Prime 3? Which was, to me, a terrific showing of how the Nintendo Wii can pull off a first-person shooter, and I don't know why any other third-party studios didn't pick up on that. Outside of a keyboard and mouse, that was one of the perfect ways in order to aim in a first-person game on a console. That was a perfect thing to do. Now you see a lot of other people with the PlayStation Move especially, where at the time those were perfect controls, and that made me not want to go to the other Prime games, because Prime 3 nailed the controls. They nailed it. They nailed it in every single regard. Now, I don't know what I feel about going to different planets, going back and forth between different planets. Maybe that became a bit too cumbersome, but as far as control scheme, I loved it, adored it. It was everything a Metroid game in that setting should be. Now, does every game have to follow that? Of course not. Of course, as I said, I'm one of the people who did enjoy Other M, and that aspect of the story about how that went about. And even on Metroid Prime 3, I thought Samus should not be a silent protagonist. She did talk. Super Metroid, she did talk. In Super Metroid, she provided the prologue that came from her own words. In Fusion, she talked about what was going on with the AI and the X-Parasite, and why haven't we gotten an extension of that timeline after Fusion? I wonder. And of course, we all know about Other M, and I do believe that Jessica Martin is a good fit for that Samus character. Have you ever seen one of her short films called For Patrick? I recommend you go and Google that and watch it. It will change your mind undeniably about her talents, about how she can do emotional scenes. But yeah, I thought that Metroid Prime would have been a great place in order to experiment with a full voice Samus, to actually have Samus be vocal in those scenes, in some of those scenes. And I don't get why they didn't do that there, even though they had everybody else talking. Why not Samus? Why not they have that? But is Retro Studios going to do a good job here when everything has been tied up, the loose ends been tied up? What else is there to talk about? Unless they're going to do a new story. Unless there's a story that is going to be told that's completely new. But yes, this could be a good sign, and I would love to see what they had in store, what they were going to show us. I would have loved to see what the original plan was going to be, how it would have looked, how it was going to play out. What was their vision before they said, we're going to start from scratch, go with retro? That would be something which, if someone were to ever leak what that would have looked like, we would see that be sold for $1 million on eBay or maybe more. That would be a collector's item if there ever was one, because now we'll never get to see it unless that happens. But all in all, I do believe that this is a good thing that they at least came forward and had the guts in order to tell us what exactly what's going on, because we didn't hear anything about Metroid Prime 4. We were wondering, did they forget that the game existed or something? Did they forget that they were telling us about the game? But I do understand the reason why, and I do believe that this might be for the better. However, we'll wait and see whether or not Retro Studios does a good job with it, assuming that they don't get into any more issues with the game, any more developmental issues. This should not be like Duke Nukem Forever. Hopefully it doesn't become like that. And I do believe that it might be good that he said that Metroid Prime was its own series in a way, because what does that really mean for Metroid games going forward? That being said, can we please just move on from the notion that Other M existed? Can we please just get over it already? Because if we don't do that, we'll never see any other games being completely loved. And I think maybe the notion that they could do something like that gives me hope that perhaps everybody's going to be left happy. At the very least, people who want to see a new Metroid game might be happy to see Retro Studios getting their hands back on the series, although we will wait and see what happens with that. Hopefully it doesn't become vaporware or another Duke Nukem Forever. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Special Report. Thanks as always for watching. If you liked the video, please hit that like button. Of course, go and subscribe for more geek gaming culture. We are going to try to get some more subscribers. We're going to try to get a push for more subs. I want to, at the very least, hit that 2K mark if at all possible. There's a lot of different stuff that I do because this is a variety themed channel, so there's not any one thing I do pigeonhole myself into. So that is perhaps a good thing for people, that I don't cater to just one thing. I do a whole bunch of different things. And of course, I want to hear your comments. Please leave your thoughts down below, but not until you get to hear the OCRemix track of the day. And seeing as how we are on the Metroid Prime trilogy, let's go with one from Metroid Prime 3. This is called Lone Hunter by Dark Sword. Very jazzy, very nice and soothing, and very chill remix on this one. Just to show that, hey, everything is going to be okay. Everything's going to be fantastic. Just relax and take a breath and just enjoy the sounds of this particular track. Very well done here. My name is Shady Shadow. Enjoy the OCRemix track that just happened.